chicken. I'm your guy.
Blinking.
I'll have what Joseph's has.
Look, somebody's talking about you.
This is what we call the voice of God.
Popping.
Everybody just gets to focus on you.
Grab me.
Probably not the best thing for an introvert.
I'm asking for you.
Well, I like a good chicken sandwich.
Touch me. Hi, David. Comment.
Oh my God.
Like.
You're actually an identical twin.
Push.
Maybe I'll just ask Julie to talk about what it is to be
No.
an identical twin.
Pick me up.
No, you didn't.
Shouting.
Surprise! Jeremiah, just hang on a second. I just got a text.
There's an edit for your new opening, Joseph.
I feel really honored to have been here, man.
By the way, you've done a masterful job. Seriously.
It was such a joy.
Thanks, Joseph. It's an honor.
Good on you. This was a pleasure.
I mean, you are the prime example of how to pivot in this new environment.
I wish everybody gets an opportunity to interact with Joseph Jaffe and Corona TV.
Who needs Cameo when I've got my own personal Cameo? Well, welcome, everybody. Happy Wednesday, September 23rd. I hope you are well. The world is crazy. The world is changing. The world is volatile. There is just so much stuff going on right now in the state of Kentucky. And yeah, let's just stop there for a moment. But we are going to try and create some order in all of the chaos because today, is Energize Day. It is National Energize Day, which from what I understand from my deep research is the opposite of it's internal energizing. Like, for example, if you were into yoga, which my guest today may or may not be into, I guess that's how you energize. You find inner peace and harmony and balance from inside and let that radiate outside. So sit back, relax, and let me relax you. And have a good time today on Corona TV. Because today my guest is John Battelle. And, to even call John an OG is, he's so much more than just an OG when it comes to media, technology, the intersection of which and now is added politics to it as well. I'll read you his bio later, but I think I met him in the Federated Media days, but also the Web 2.0 days. Maybe you've heard of Wired, maybe you've heard of Industry Standard, all of the above. John is the guy. He's the guy, and we'll meet him soon enough. So John is the Hump Day guest tomorrow. CUDA. I'm trying to negotiate with him to do Corona cocktails with me. We'll see if he does that, but I hope he will. And then, of course, on Friday, Bob Leodis from the Association of National Advertisers, the man that controls the association, that controls all of those ad dollars. So very quickly, happy birthday to Douglas Burdett. The man has one of the greatest podcasts out there, the Marketing Book Podcast, Cami Dunaway, Shubu Mitra. I met him at Coke back in the day. And then also, of course, to all my fine feathered friends on LinkedIn. I'm not really sure who Demon Song is, but I heard he might be related to Demon Sperm, but that is just unofficial. So I'm not sure about that, but we'll find out soon enough because I did send Demon a happy birthday greeting. Well, it's time for our seated soliloquy. And I thought long and hard about what I wanted to actually call this soliloquy, whether it was discourse or political discourse or civility in politics. But I actually ended up with just one word, and that word is civility. Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia were the best of friends. It's the odd couple on performance-enhancing drugs. They were the best of friends off the court and arch enemies on the court, so to speak. So what does any of that have to do with fixing the broken political media monster of a machine or machine of a monster? I'll give you two ideas that both have their roots in the RBGAS, unlikely union. Remember Hannity and Combs? You should know who Sean Hannity is, but perhaps you need a refresher on Alan Combs. He was an American radio and television host and liberal political commentator, and one half of the Fox News show Hannity and Combs, which ran from 1996 to 2009. Now, sadly, Combs died of lymphoma in 2017 at the age of 66. We need more unlikely bedfellows like Hannity and Combs, friends, business partners, co-hosts, whatever you want to call it or them, but either way, partnerships built and based on mutual respect. Fair and balanced should be reclaimed by all of society to be a badge of honor and a principle that is practiced as both an honor code and, quite frankly, cost of doing business. And there should be a penalty if you break that honor code. Now, my second idea is inspired by the Supreme Court itself, but in a very lateral sort of way. Instead of circular, endless arguments that are filled with alternative facts, opinions, and more opinions, and more opinions, what if there was a ruling body that would decide on cases of assertions, points of view, or positions? Here's an example. By instituting a travel ban on China, the US prevented millions of ensuing deaths. Well, the counter argument would mention that 40,000 people, generally citizens and green card holders, still traveled from China to the US after the ban was instituted, as well as the fact that, according to what we are led to believe, the virus came into the US via Europe and not China, at least directly. The Supreme Court of Truth would rule and render a verdict, after which only the approved verbiage or narrative would be permissible. Now, I'm sure there will be an app or these days a widget for that. These are just two of my ideas as to how to fix our current mess of a political media climate. What are yours? Well, I know my guest today is on the job as well, and he's actually doing something about it. So let's ask him, shall we? But before we do that, let me give you a little bit of an introduction to John Battelle. John Battelle is co-founder and CEO of Recount Media, Inc., a New York-based media platform. He also serves as chairman of the board at Sovereign Holdings, LLC, and a director at LiveRamp, an NYSE-listed company. In addition, he's adjunct professor and senior research scholar at the School for International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. He previously was founder and CEO of six media and technology companies, including Federated Media, The Industry Standard, and Wired. In 2005, John wrote The Search: How Google and its Rivals Rewrote the Rules of Business and Transformed Our Culture. John holds a bachelor's degree in anthropology and a master's degree in journalism from UC Berkeley, and I'm proud to say he is a guest on Corona TV. Welcome to the show, John.
Well, it's good to be here, Joseph.
It's really good to actually see you and reconnect with you. I've enjoyed every single time that we've had the opportunity to connect on in any capacity and on any level.
As have I. I'm looking forward to this, and congrats to you on what you're doing with Corona TV. I think it's super cool.
Oh, thank you. It's like media innovation. If I can just do a fraction of that in my professional life based on what you've accomplished, then I would consider that to be a true success. So I sent it back. I sent it back to you with interest. But yeah, it's interesting to think about how media invents, reinvents. Sometimes comes full circle. Other times goes through seismic changes, and I think we'll get to that soon enough. But John, I thought everybody knows John Battelle, the businessman, but do they know John Battelle, the man about town? So I thought I would share two fun facts about you. Well, one of them is actually connected to what you're doing right now. But we're going to talk about the John Battelle that is dedicated to yoga and cycling. And I don't know, it's amazing that I found this photo of you. And can you tell me what? First of all, I didn't know you had that tattoo. But what is that? Exactly. What is that pose, by the way? Do you know? I mean, is that a common yoga pose, or
yeah, maybe it's very common, particularly in the yoga I practice, which is which is a modified version of it's called, well, it's not Bikram, but it's every studio has their own process, but we go through 26 different moves in an hour, and that is one of them on the left and the right. It's just a standard, standing twist, but that is part of the practice indeed.
Well, I will. The second photo I have of you, you are wearing a shirt, but for some reason your underpants on the other side as well. But as we can see, the back room staff at Corona TV are hard at work to uncover these photos. But in all seriousness, talk a little bit about what yoga and cycling bring to your life and have brought to your life, especially during these times when our heads and our even our mental health are under so much stress and pressure.
Yeah, well, when I started practicing about 25 years ago, when I was running the industry standard. I completely blew my back out, and I'm pretty sure that was related both to the stress of being a startup CEO for the first time, having a runaway success company, which seems like it would be a good thing, but it's actually terrifying. Probably, at that point, 35 years of just destroying my body, through sports and, not paying attention. And then really sitting like this for 5 or 6 years,
Right.
And so they wanted to fuse several vertebrae in my back to repair it. And I asked if there was another way to do it. And then they said, well, you can try to beat it with physical therapy. And my physical therapist suggested yoga. And I've just been, practicing pretty religiously ever since. And the Baptiste approach is hot. So you're in a room with, it's very warm, 104 degrees, 105 degrees. And it requires a certain focus. And once you get into the practice, you absolutely lose the past and the future, and you live, very much in the moment. And I found that practice is really important to mental health. And when the pandemic began in the past 7 months or so, it's been even more important. I've had to modify, doing online practice and, bringing space heaters into the room to make it, and you miss sort of the communal aspect of having people in the room with you, but it is just the mental piece of it. It gives, I think I'm not a meditator. Many people, especially in the tech industry, are. But it is quite meditative, as is cycling, which is something you can still practice now in the pandemic, out of doors. And I find being outside, and particularly when I moved to New York, I rode for decades on Mount Tam, which is a mountain in Marin, just near San Francisco. I used to live on that mountain, and getting up on that mountain and into the woods and away from everything was, 3 or 4 hour ride. Some people play golf. I ride a bike. Then when I got to New York, it takes 40 minutes from where I live to get out of the city. But once you do, that is good for your head too. So for me, both those practices are about clearing my head and, returning to a ritual that reminds me of myself.
Well, thank you for sharing. We actually have I don't know what the right word is for someone who practices meditation. Let me say guru and hope that's correct. But we actually have someone coming in who's going to try and teach myself and people some kind of meditative therapy, because they're coming in the week of the election.
Oh yeah,
and so that has been timed to perfection. One of the things that I did during this time, John, was until I got what I think has been diagnosed as bursitis in the hip. Mm-hmm. But I ran more than I've ever run in my life, and I also found it to be truly, I would say, liberating. I listened to a lot of podcasts, Howard Stern, Tim Ferriss, one Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. podcast when he uttered the I guffawed in the middle of my run when he said it's not about First Amendment. This was about the Facebook stuff going on. He said it's less First Amendment and it's more second Gulf Stream. I thought that was a great.
Scott's great. He's a friend. I actually interviewed him yesterday for something, so it's funny you bring him up.
Well, and he's also just it's funny. He just struck a nerve, a correct one, I might add, with respect to exposing at least isolating the exposed nerve that is our colleges and the whole practice of how broken the whole system is, and it's funny because he's probably been saying that for decades, but right place, right time. So good,
definitely.
So good on him. So John, I mean, I remember I still probably, if I went to my attic now, I'd find bins upon bins of industry standards in particular. Some red herrings, fast companies and whys, but for me, industry standard was my industry standard. You've seen the media business change radically. I always think about Marshall McLuhan. He said, the medium is the message, and then smart asses like myself would say, no, the medium is the metric. And we've seen a lot change and we've seen nothing change. I want to, speak to you and ask you, what is your assessment as to what the state of the media business is right now? And not just media, and we see a resurgence with respect to an explosion with respect to podcasting. Joe Rogan's sale, kind of at the top of that list. But also the monetization and the subsidization of content through commercials or commercialism.
Yeah, it's definitely something I've been obsessed with my whole career, and I think initially maybe the past, rather the first 15 years of my career, I was obsessed in a way that wasn't deeply challenged. In other words, when I was making magazines, you mentioned the industry standard. That's the prototype of the first issue, or Wired. That's the first issue right there. What you could do back then, both those publications, one was launched in the early 90s, the other was launched in the late 90s, was you could trust that there was a relatively stable and well understood ecosystem that supported media. You had marketers who saw, who were sort of well into the rut of how they bought media and supported media. You had, distribution that was well established. Time Warner at the time was one of the big distributors of magazines, print. And you had reading and behavior, consumer behaviors that were well established, and ways to get to those consumers through direct mail. So if you wanted to start something that was innovative in media, that you had a new idea inside of that ecosystem, it wasn't easy. I mean, that's the saying that the way to make a small fortune in media would be to start with a large fortune. That saying is an old saying. It's still true. But it was not easy to do. But if you had a really good idea and some talent and a good team, you could try something new based on this idea that you had, the platform ecosystem was relatively stable. And for, I would say, the better part of a decade between 2000 and 2010, that was also true in new media or digital media. The internet was the platform, and websites were the currency that the way that you would get in. They were the magazines, if you will, the container for the media. Relatively well understood. We spent the last half of the 90s figuring it out, and the first few years of 2000 getting out of a bad recession. But then you had a reasonable, there was a lot of change within it, but the playbook was pretty straightforward. Since then, I think nothing has been sort of easy, or the ecosystem has not been stable. It's been really unstable, and it's been hostile, in fact, to the creation of true innovation in media. Now you see, if you're a bit more Catholic, small c, with the definition of media, there's innovation everywhere. But if you narrow that to journalistic media that has an editorial point of view, that is attempting to inform and engage, on topics of, national importance, that's been, the last decade has not been kind to the media. And so I find that there are some villains that you can identify, in this narrative, as easy targets, and my friend Scott Galloway would, as you pointed out, would certainly place Facebook at the top of that list. But there's a reason that Facebook got big, more than one reason, and there's a reason that I think we ended up where we are, to quote yourself at the top when you were talking about civility. We've lost the ability to have a conversation at scale without, picking sides, without feeling threatened. And part of the reason that we have is that we have decided that convenience is more important than truth. And when you pick apart that idea, it's, you can't make a brand where the promise is negative. I'm going to solve a problem that you didn't know you had. So first understand this problem you have, and then fix it by adopting a new habit, right? Big brands are built because they are positive and they make someone feel like they're getting something of value that's relatively easy to get. Amazon Prime, Facebook, connect to my friends, Google, find stuff I need, whatever it might be. And so the premise of journalism is there's problems, and I know you may not want to know about these problems, but it's really important that you do. And they were packaged, back in what I call the packaged goods media sort of era. These packages here, they were packaged in a brand that was like, I am part of or a member of this community, right? The Wired community. Whoops, wrong way. That way. Yeah. Backwards. The Wired community or the industry standard community. I'm part of the internet community. I'm part of the digital technology community. I'm a revolutionary. I'm changing the world. The information was secondary to the connection to a sense of purpose, a community. And it's been increasingly difficult to build those kinds of brands when the connection is no longer with the brand, but it's with the platform, right? So building a media brand on top of a platform that owns the connection to the consumer is a very difficult thing to do. It's quite similar to trying to build, a CPG or a consumer direct platform brand on top of Amazon, right? It's a very difficult thing to do, and it's been made more difficult by the economics of the business models of these platforms. And what we're trying to do, and I'm sure we'll get into it with the Recount, is actually crack a few hard nuts here. We're trying to build, first and foremost, a journalistic brand that has a community that is dedicated to the brand, that sees a mission in the brand. And then we're trying to distribute and monetize that brand over the platforms, which is also very hard. But we can get into perhaps later about why I think the time is ripe for that at the moment. But I think some of the biggest shifts have really in the media ecosystem have been around this idea of convenience. That most people watch Netflix not because of one or two hit shows. That's maybe why they watch HBO. That's maybe why they watch Showtime or, Disney Plus for that matter. They watch Netflix for the convenience. There's always something on, right? It's super easy and convenient for me to just put Netflix on and find something to entertain me, right? And my guess is if I were to ask you, what was your favorite Netflix show from last year, you wouldn't know the answer to it. But what you do know is Netflix is very convenient. And I have friends who have actively tried to not purchase things on Amazon. But Amazon is incredibly convenient for that odd item that you just need right now. They just seem to have solved all the search. If you put it into Google, Amazon comes up first. It's very hard to buy something direct from a vendor. For example, I'm a rampant journaler. This is something that I could have said, was also one of my, so I write 3 pages a day, right? I like these particular kinds of books. I had to work 15 extra minutes to buy these books from the actual vendor to get through all the Amazon ads and through the terrible website that this particular vendor had to actually purchase it there as opposed to purchase it on Amazon. Amazon has solved the algorithm of convenience. And similarly in media, Facebook and Google have solved the algorithm of convenience for, tell me something that's happening today, or entertain me with some kind of media, or feed me stuff that makes me feel like I'm informed on the politics of the day and reinforces my beliefs about why I'm right, and there's a problem in our current media, which is that we've lost the ability to entertain other points of view, and we've lost the trust that there is in fact truth somewhere in the dialogue, and I think that there are many reasons for why that is, and I wouldn't put all the blame in the evil algorithms of Facebook or Google, but I would say that we need to actively, as media entrepreneurs, search for ways to heal this problem, and that's why I sort of got off the bench, if you will, and decided to start another company.
So I want to ask you a follow-up based on the state of the state of the digital union or the consumer union. But before I do, I want to go back to I'm not exaggerating when I say that this book, The Search, I put up there in the same category as it should be with like the Clue Train Manifesto. It was that precedent-setting, busting, and landmark. I'm still not sure that people. I've said that I believe the most fundamental change in the media landscape in our lifetimes, and I said it then, and I still say it to this day, is search. Is pull versus push, more so than digital, more so than anything else that has come since. Have we, as a media community, have we got it yet? Have we figured out the power of pull versus the power of push, and figured out how to integrate that and monetize that into the machine? Because I loved what you said, by the way, earlier about the fact that the landscape is not stable. And if it isn't stable, it's not going to support a business model or a revenue stream, no matter how innovative.
Well, actually, what you're making me think about this in a bit of a new frame. So, go with me while I think out loud here for a second. But, I agree that the most powerful shift that occurred in media, at least in my career, has been search. And it's the reason I was moved to write that book. And it's the reason I haven't written another one. I've made a couple of feints at writing another book, but for whatever reason, I didn't think it was as big as the last one. And I just don't want to write an easy book. I want to write one as important as that one. And I'm waiting for that story, right? I have a sense of what it's going to be now, and we can get into that later. And of course, it has something to do with how we process data and what that means, culturally and socially. But search is also about that. But let me challenge a little bit the framing here. If you take as stipulated, that search, as you put it, pull versus push is one of the most fundamental shifts in media. I would argue that that shift has been colonized by the platforms that we've been discussing. If you are an Amazon Prime member, the vast majority of your searches that have anything to do with commerce start on Amazon. If you are a Google customer, the vast majority of searches that you query and complete are on Google suggested search results, Google Maps, Waze, some Google property or some Google suggested property, in their one box search. The pull of the consumer, the promise of the open, end-to-end internet has been colonized by very large platforms that understand the power of what you're saying, Joseph, and have turned it into incredibly powerful, convenient business models, to the point where, while we may think we are pullers, we're pulling information and navigating our own world, the truth is that the vast majority of people on these platforms are being fed information through the feed. I mean, they call it the fucking feed, the Facebook feed, the Instagram feed, the Twitter feed. These are algorithmically driven models. And so if you look at those two things as, as models for how we might construct society, one with billions of people actively pulling information independently, and one with billions of people being fed information, I would say that the more powerful and interesting one, at least from a sort of Western view of democracy, would be pull. But the one that we have basically canonized as most powerful at the moment is push. And I would extend that, by the way, to the Apple iTunes store and an App Store, and by extension the Google App Store and Android Store. You have things pushed at you, and I think the reason that a lot of us, you called me an OG, a lot of us sort of OGs got so excited about the internet in the Wired days, and then through what we called Web 2.0, was that it seemed like pull as a model was going to win. And I would argue that many of the ills of our society that seem to be coming to a head, in this current political cycle, are reflections of an embrace of a push business model.
I mean, it's as I was even saying what I was saying to you, I almost bit my lip, and so I have to come full circle and say I agree with you with that reframe, because it is different right now, and I jotted the certain words down as you were talking: laziness, discerning, the power of curation or the need for curation, trust, and then all this coming full circle with respect to ironically a movie on Netflix that everyone's talking about, which of course is The Social Dilemma.
Right.
By the way, what I'm watching at the moment is Cobra Kai. So
my guess is that was right at the top of your feed.
No, I just, I'm a child of the 80s. I love the Karate Kid. I love the. You'll notice also I went outside because it is National Energized Day, and I felt like the background was too was
very
too noisy
over there.
But I think there is, it's funny because with all of this, those words that I said, I always play a game with my guests, which is they have to guess who said this quote. And this is one of my favorite quotes, seriously one of my favorite quotes, and I think you'll get it. But I feel I'll give you the context around it in a moment. This is the quote: "Television, a medium, so called because it's neither rare nor well done."
Oh, that's good.
Should I tell you who said it?
Well, I mean, there's a number of people I might guess, but I prefer to not guess wrong. So do tell me.
Ernie Kovacs from the 50s. From the 50s. You know, I wrote Life After the 30-Second Spot back in 2004, 2005. But even before that, what you spoke about the OGs getting excited about the web and Web 2.0. I used to call it 4D, right? 4D advertising, because the richest medium, of course, was television, sight, sound, and motion. But when you added interactivity, the power of the mouse, the power of touch, another sense, it just exponentially, you know, it was like n factorial, took off and took over. But this was back when I was an idealistic interactive strategist back in 2000, you know, reading the industry standard, you know, back in, I don't know, 2001, 2002, whatever the case may be. So I would, you know, it's a good segue into what happens when the power of television meets the search for curation, civility, an antidote to convenience. I think it's a good segue to what you're doing now. But before we get there, help me just get over that bridge and maybe just I'll pick a word: laziness. What's really happened is, you know, and by the way, I'll just add a little extra dimension to the question. I loved what you said about feed, because the reality is we're being force-fed right now. It is like, I mean, you couldn't be more accurate. The fire hose is attached to our mouths, and we're being just fed all of this drivel and banal and vanilla. And where is the journalistic integrity, and where is the excellence?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to get into there. Let me start with the feed. You know, one of the things that I think that the industry that I've been part of and covered and started companies inside of, technology industry, is just terrible at is imagining scenarios independent of whatever our fantasy is for the product we're creating. So, you know, if, you know, you recall that I was really involved in the blogging kind of revolution, bubble, whatever you might call it, of sort of 2000 to 2010. And I had a relatively popular blog. A lot of my friends did. And with the blog, we, you know, quite by convenience, I'm sure, you know, Ev Williams and Matt Mullenweg and the people who built the actual tools for blogging, every post you did was at the top, and whatever the next post was you did was the next one down, and so on and so forth. And that was just it. It was called a reverse chronological feed. And if you went to my site or your site or anyone's site, you knew that you could just keep scrolling to get that one, you know, 3 months ago. And there's usually a calendar on the right-hand side of the blog if you wanted to go to a date, you know, and it was all very, you know, quaint to when you think about it now, that anybody would go to someone's site and poke around for a half an hour, right? I mean, but that was in fact the behavior of tens of millions of people in 2007, right? But what we did there was create the structure of a feed, right? And it's not a surprise that Facebook launched in, you know, as a commercial entity in 2005, 6, looked to what the current ecosystem of new media, social media was, which was blogs, and said, I know, we'll do a feed. And instead of every, you know, blogger you might want to follow is in that feed, your friends, your family, brands you follow, you know, topics, whatever you might care about or like will be thrown into the feed. And very quickly you have the problem which technology could solve, of, well, what is important and what's not important. And this gets to your question of curation, right? And the way that we as human beings have solved the problem of too much information and not enough time, what my partner John Heilemann calls the time famine, right, is we have put our trust in other people to not waste our time by helping us determine what's the most important thing to pay attention to. And we've outsourced that over centuries to these people called journalists, editors who say, this is important, this is not. And what we did in sort of 2007 onwards is we stopped trusting editors and we started trusting algorithms. And it happened in a way that wasn't evil or intentionally malicious. It was a problem that Silicon Valley engineers had to solve, which is, shit, as soon as someone has like more than 25 friends, their feed has too much stuff in it. How do we create an algorithm to automate showing them just the stuff that we think they're most interested in? And, for a little while it worked. And then two things happened. One, the business model, and two, the people who drove the business model, which is to say advertisers. And I'm not blaming big brands. I'm blaming every single one of the hundreds of millions of advertisers who could buy their way into your feed, right? Doesn't matter if it's Joe's limousine service or if it's, Procter & Gamble. They all could equally buy into your feed. And the business model said, we're open for business and you can get in here, right? And what that did is create a new set of constraints as to how your attention would be, sliced, diced, and served up to these new participants in your feed. That began to drive what kinds of things were put in your feed that were not advertisements to ensure that you were engaged long enough to see the ad. That's the externality and the scenario that when Zuckerberg and Chris Cox and the others were solving a technical problem in 2007 of 25 friends and too much information in your feed, they solved that problem algorithmically. Then they took that algorithm and opened it up to an entirely new world that then redefined what you ended up seeing. And it all happened over the course of 10 years. So that we kind of were the boiling frogs here. And it wasn't just us as consumers that were the boiled frogs. It was, in fact, them. They weren't aware they were doing it, and when you think about how Zuckerberg responded to the 2016 election allegations, immediately after the election, can't imagine why fake news and, Russian trolls, and that's not a big deal. There was no impact whatsoever. He actually believed that, right? He didn't understand he had built a machine that had so dramatically changed our diet, our information diet, and made us all a bit sick. And so, I don't place blame in terms of, malicious behavior, but I do think that the technology industry has been terrible at imagining externalities outside of whatever the goal of the product design is, right? And there's a whole movement around this now. Tristan Harris and others have been very involved in it recently. And I'm pleased that movement exists. And some companies like Salesforce have incorporated these new design principles into their product development, which is awesome. But that's all a long way of answering your question, the meat of which I'm not sure I even addressed. So please,
no, but what I did like about it, and then I'll show you a couple of comments, and then we'll get into we'll get into the recount. What's interesting is obviously we've seen the reverse of what you were talking about, which is especially in print, right? Which is as ad dollars dried up, because circulation. I actually wrote about this vicious cycle in the very first book, and I said this is the vicious cycle. As audience declines, so ad dollars decline. as ad dollars decline, so the content, the quality, the integrity of the content declines
Right.
as a result of the. And so what happened is you eventually ended up with a magazine that used to be 200 pages. Now it looked like a pamphlet.
Right.
The way you explained it, and I think sometimes it's just great to hear it articulated, especially by someone like you, John. I'm going to call Professor. I feel like Professor Battelle. I'm going to call you from now on. But what really happened is what you were talking about is how is essentially in order to support the advertising, the algorithm created more content, and hence native and programmatic, and it's a really beautiful way to just
the algorithm and the business model, it just doesn't only reward advertising content. It rewards engaging content of any kind. And if you happen to be an actor who wishes to engage the public or some very specific segment of the public with content that is meant to persuade, you can do that organically if you understand the algorithms. And in fact, organic content is far more insidious across these platforms than paid.
Truly, especially with lack of, transparency, lack of disclosure, and so on and so forth.
Right.
All right. So I think, David Libby said, great to see John on Corona TV. And Cyrus, actually, who's been a guest on the show, he actually said this before you mentioned blogging. He said, I think we can trace the origins of our problems today to the advent of blogging in terms of opening up Pandora's box. Tom Morris, who I'm sure you'll meet in the after show as well. Interesting little side conversation going on with respect to blogging, what it was, what it wasn't, what it could have been, what it should have been. I don't know if you want to respond to that, or we could just talk about, because in the time we have left, I am very interested in how you are taking these elements, right? Television, a so-called medium, because it is neither rare nor well done.
Yeah.
The power of video meets, addressing the lazy, force-fed convenience of the consumer, the lame duck that is a consumer. So why don't you talk about that, if you will?
Yeah. So as a way in, I don't think the consumers are necessarily lazy, but I do think we crave convenience, and that might seem like it's the same clothing as being, lazy or unmotivated. But really, what it is I will lean forward and pull something towards me if it gives me a benefit that is that feels a little bit like magic, right? And I've been told a million times that the first time someone opened Wired felt magical. And I've been told a million times the first time someone stumbled across any number of blogs, and we can get into Cyrus's comment maybe in the after show, but it felt like magic when you connected with that voice and that individual, and all of a sudden felt like you were part of something, bigger. What I believe has happened is that the environment for innovation in media has become so hostile that we very rarely have those kinds of products created anymore that truly crack a new, a new approach. And what my partner John Heilemann in this business and I identified was that there was both a business, a business opportunity and a format/platform opportunity in the media business at this very moment. And what I mean by that is, as it relates, by the way, to video, video, unlike text, video has no URL structure. There's no link structure in the world of video. And one of the more interesting media developments of the past 5 or so years, and certainly if you were to name the sort of 10 successful media companies in the last 5 years, 7 of them would be email newsletter driven. The Athletic, Thrillist, Morning Brew, on and on and on. The email newsletter has been, so Axios, right? How people have cracked a really important code, which is, hey, if you're a reader, if you're someone who reads words, there's too many good words, okay? You can't read 15 long form articles a day, but you can read my newsletter and I can intelligently curate those articles for you, provide a little bit of commentary on top, build a new product from the, from the commodity that is all the other stuff that's already been made, right? We all probably listening here, subscribe to any number of email newsletters. And I thought to myself, where's that for video? Where is the email newsletter a video? Why is there not a product that takes all the video in the world on a given topic and condenses it down into a new form, a new format that uses the most powerful medium ever created, sight, sound, motion, all together, video. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, a minute of video is worth 1,000,000, right?
Right.
So how do you pull that together using all the skill and the production, experience of the video world and deliver concisely 1 minute, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute 15 of video that gets you smart on what the hell's happening right now? So you don't have to sit there and watch an hour of cable where people are wasting your time, where you don't have to get lost in YouTube when you start saying, gosh, I wonder what happened in politics today. And you end up like 7 videos into a rabbit hole watching something about the flat earth, right? Like, why is it that that doesn't exist in the world? And I think the reason is the business model. It's not in the linear cable television's business model to deliver you exactly what you need as a consumer in a short amount of time, because that breaks their ad model. And it's not in YouTube or Facebook's business model to give you exactly the information you want so you can get in and get out. No, I'm sorry, Facebook's a fucking portal. Same as Yahoo in 1999. They want you on as long as possible, as engaged as long as possible, so they can show you as many ads as possible. It's just the way it is. So if you're going to innovate facing the consumer and solve a problem for them, which is, I just want to get smart on what Trump said and what the left said about it and what the right said about it and what whoever just got, rage tweeted at by the president said about it. I want to know what happened now, in, out, done. And we thought, if you could do that and you could crack that format, you could add all the skills of sound editing, graphics, pulling all these different clips from all these different services, putting it all together. John, my partner, calls it hip hop journalism, like literally making a new song from all the other stuff. Drop a beat here, right? And
love that.
That's what we are doing at the Recount. And I am pleased to say it's fucking working. Like the business model side of it was, we are not going to play the game of audience arbitrage. That is the game that everyone's been playing forever, which is, last 10 years anyways. I am, as a publisher, I've lost my audience. I have to go get it on Facebook. I've got to pay Facebook. I got to pay LinkedIn. I got to pay Twitter. I got to pay Google to drive audience to me, where I can then take that audience and resell it to a marketer. And the marketer looks at me increasingly with some, skepticism, saying, wait a minute, you just bought your audience over here on these platforms. I can buy them there too. Why should I even bother with you when I can go get them and do audience buying on the platforms? By the way, cheaper, with better analytics, more cross-platform identification. What do I need you for, publisher? In the last 10 years, we have fallen in love with audience buying and lost context completely. And context is what publishers do. Context is what journalism does. And context is fundamental to rebuilding this divided society that we live in right now. So I figured, let's make contextual journalism that can actually travel inside of social networks. Short form video that can work inside of Twitter, inside of Facebook, inside of other places. And we started with Twitter, and it worked. I mean, it's been working. It's thank God, but it's working. It's, we're not as huge as, some of these major media conglomerates are who've been around for a long time, but we have hundreds of millions of views of our stuff over the last month or two. And that means, and we have great engagement metrics, blah, blah, blah. It just means we figured a format out, and now it's time to take that to lots of different places and to new content, which is where we're going from politics to other parts of the power equation. Power in politics, power in business, power in tech, power in sports and entertainment. There's a lot of places to go with this format and with this approach.
So I love that idea, because one of the things that we were discussing before is that you weren't really into politics coming into this, and you still aren't, but you are into power, at least the power of, or to the power of.
Right.
For me, what intrigues me is, you've almost got, it's like a return, it's almost revenge, thank God, of the curator, of the journalist, of integrity, of humanity, right? So there's that, which is news for news that we all could use, and it's interesting because I think of I'll give you a continuum. There's TikTok on the one side. There's poor Quibi, probably closer to that. And then you have current TV, and I think back, everything is about timing. Everything is about timing. That current TV was ahead of its time.
It was
recognizing the dwindling or the fractured amount of our attention spans. But this, as Victor Hugo said, is an idea whose time has come. And with your permission, I'd like to show a clip.
Sure.
I
don't know what you've chosen, but I'm happy to narrate it.
Well, I don't know if you'll be able to talk. You might be able to.
I won't be able to talk over it, but afterwards.
But it's it just got my attention. So let's go ahead and show it.
Oh, the Shark Week one. Yeah.
I hope the
Does the sound work? Oh, unfortunately, it sounds like the sound isn't coming through.
No, I think it is.
Okay, I'm not hearing it, but.
Oh, you know what? This is this is why I need help, an assistant. So I'm seeing the comments. I was like, what? The comments will come up if the sounds are working. The sound will work if, in fact, I click on a certain button that says share audio. This is why they pay me the big bucks, John. So let's do it. Let's do it again. Hell, it's my show. And we'll start it again. We'll do it live, damn it. We'll do it live.
Back down.
Now let me just bring us all the way back. Incarnate a little bit of my Bill O'Reilly.
Do I take the mic off? Okay. Yeah, we've learned. I don't know if you saw my thing during the convention. It's not just Shark Week. It's Shark Week. I just have to thank you as a woman in America for It's Shark Week, motherfuckers, because I gotta tell you, it inspired, seriously, like women in America needed to hear that. And it inspires me every day. It's like not a small thing, like seeing the governor of Michigan, this incredibly powerful woman that the president of the United States has come barreling after with everything he has. She does not, she does not back down. And then we see you at the podium and saying like, game on, it's Shark Week. And like, did you think that like whispering it was going to be better?
I thought we were in a small room with just a handful of people because we're following my own orders.
Of course.
I did not know that the footage would get out. So yeah.
But I seriously, it was like a boost to like people in America, women, but men too, that needed it. So
well, I got up the next morning and saw it and I was just like, oh God. And then after a couple hours, people were like, yes. I'm like, all right, I said it. I'll own it. And you know what? I'm not going to apologize for it.
So, the interesting thing about that, Joe, when we set out to make this brand, the Recount, that's one of the series that we do in partnership with Showtime. The backstory of that particular little tidbit is that we were the ones who found that footage and put it up on Twitter almost instantaneously after she said it. And Shark Week motherfucker started to trend on Twitter, and it was our video. And she responded to us, to the brand, the Recount. And there was a massive sort of conversation about what it all meant. And, Trump, and his, I almost used the word trolls, but his crew responded to it, for their political gain, and her, supporters came back, and this conversation ensued. The Recount's brand was at the center of that conversation. We identified the very moment of video that would create that conversation, and then we became sort of the host of that conversation in real time. And then in a cooler moment, which you just played, a contextualization of that conversation, right? And that's what brands in media should do. That brands are conveners of conversation, dialogue that moves something forward. And what I'm so happy about where the Recount is, President Trump quote tweeted us twice this weekend. Adam Schiff responded to that quote tweet, right? Our stuff, the stuff that we do. And we're in that conversation now, and that gives a brand permission, to be a convener and to be a bullshit caller, to say, okay, we've got your attention. You're full of shit. You're not telling the truth. And as a journalist, that's where you want to be. You're right in the middle of the scrap, right? And seen by the audience watching it as, I wouldn't say the referee, but perhaps, the color commentator, right? That's trusted to make sense of this spectacle that's occurring in front of you, right? And that spectacle is not just politics. That spectacle is technology. That spectacle is business. That spectacle is just about anywhere where there's too much power and not enough bullshit calling. And so our brand that we're building, and it's very intentional, and it's much different and harder to do than when we say built Wired. Wired was the first thing that I was involved with, that I was a founder of, that became a true brand. This is the last thing I'm going to be involved in. This is like, those are the two bookends as far as I'm concerned in terms of building media companies, but they're both brands that convene conversation and call bullshit.
Well, listen, Professor Battelle, I have to say that I have enjoyed this lesson second to none. You are also the first person in about 120 interviews that uttered the immortal words "motherfucker," but actually it wasn't even yours. It was Governor Whitmer.
Yeah, at least it was, it was a governor.
I love it. Listen, Corona TV is about keeping it real, especially when other people aren't. You've got to be able to call, as Rashad Tabakawala would say, you've got to be able to call the turd on the table. Right. So this has been fun. I cannot wait. I mean, your however many millions of views is now +1, because I am sold and I'm hooked. I'm just going to enjoy watching this because, we need it. The world needs this voice that can call the BS on both sides. So for those of you, if you want to join the Recount, maybe, in fact, come on over to the Zoom after show, and then I can ask John the question, which is, why is it called? Don't mention the answer now. Why is it called Recount or the Recount? I know there was a certain Recount. I'm assuming it's because of that, but we'll find out soon enough. John, it's been real. I won't complete the hashtag, but it's just been absolutely awesome catching up. And I'm going to debut something for the very first time. John Battelle.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
There you go. Everybody, we'll see you on the Zoom after show. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at CoronaTV.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.